All right. My dear fellow listeners, good evening once again, and welcome to another edition of Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat is a Canadian initiative with a unique impact. There are a few different ways to listen to us. You can listen to us on the regular dial, that's the radio, 102.7 CKMS FM. You can listen to us in TV as well, for those of you who have the Rogers digital box. And of course, we are live streaming Chit Chat here, so do take the opportunity to share a page. We ask you to stay with us if you would like to learn a thing or two. However, if you're looking for an opportunity to vent out negativity, this is not for you. Tonight, we thought we take the opportunity to give you some clarification when it comes to this whole Guyana election deal here, particularly when it comes to the CCJ hearing that we have had last Wednesday. And who's better than Mohabir Anil Nandlall to have that chit chat with, to give us some really a better understanding as to what's next when it comes to that. In that sense, obviously there are lots of information circling along, too much to digest and all of that. So tonight we're hoping that he can take his time to kind of really make it a little bit easier for us, kind of simplified for us. And of course we have Daniel here as well, who will add to the conversation as well. So gentlemen, welcome to Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm fine, thank you. And thank you for inviting me here. And I want to say good evening to all your viewers and listeners across Canada and, of course, elsewhere.
All right. So
Thank you as well, Narine. And when you mentioned my name next to someone like Mr. Anil Nandlall, I was wondering if you were getting it right, because I learned so much from Anil. We incidentally grew up in the same village, but a wonderful person who I always talk to when I want to know things that I don't know about in politics and in law and elsewhere. And again, and good evening to your viewers and listeners.
Well, I can answer that question. I get it right. I know you for a long time as well too, and so for me, it's a really good combination here tonight. So we're going to get right into it, and obviously we know that information, a lot of information out there, of course, is easily accessible and so on, but people are still confused too. So we're hoping that tonight, we can take the time to kind of simplify it a little bit, and we're not going to worry too much about the past. We are more concerned as to what people can expect and all of that. So my very first question, and this is for you, Anil, if you don't mind, what happens after the Caribbean Court of Justice makes its ruling on Wednesday? What happened based on that ruling?
Now, first of all, we have to understand what is before the Caribbean Court of Justice. I have heard a lot of people explaining or trying to explain
Correct.
the process, and there is a lot of misinformation out there. There is a lot of misplaced expectation, and it is therefore important that we manage the expectations out of what will come from the Caribbean Court of Justice. And it is necessary for me to backpedal a little so as to put the court proceedings into context. It is already known that the recount was done and that the recount was observed by the CARICOM team, and the recount was observed by local observers. The Carter Center was banned from coming back into Guyana, so they did not observe. But you had local observers, you had the Private Sector Commission, you had the Bar Association of Guyana, you had, importantly, the high commissioners and diplomats. The international community were there and they observed the process. The process resulted in certain results after the count. Those results were tabulated and certified by GCOM staff itself, including Mr. Lowenfie, right? And the CARICOM and all the teams endorsed the report, the recount as a credible process, transparent process, and they made calls for the declaration of the results of the election to be based upon the results generated by the recount. In addition to those names that I called, the American government, the US, the Canadian government, the United Kingdom government, the European Union, CARICOM, the Commonwealth, OAS, all these international organizations and many outstanding personalities have called publicly for the recount results to be accepted and to be formed the basis of the results for the declaration. That is GCOM's responsibility. The law says that GCOM must direct the chief elections officer using those results to prepare certain statutory forms that will establish how many seats each of the political parties have won at the elections based upon the number of votes cast. There's a legal or a statutory formula that is ensconced in the Representation of the People's Act. And it is the role and function of the CEO to take those results and plug it into the formula and then prepare the statutory form to show, one, the number of parties and the votes they have gotten and the seats that they have gotten, and also to say who is the president and which party, of course, shall form the next government. And that is the report that Lowenfield was instructed to prepare. Lowenfield went to prepare the report and then came back, and before he presented the report, he claimed that there was a case filed at the Court of Appeal. Lowenfield was one of the first persons to know about this case. I am the lawyer for the People's Progressive Party. I wrote, if you can remember, I wrote the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal to say once an application is filed, please notify me instantaneously. Lowenfield was notified before me of the proceedings and claimed that an injunction was granted in the proceedings, restraining him from presenting this report to the commission. A few hours after, it turned out that no injunction was granted, that it was simply an application filed in the Court of Appeal seeking certain orders. Even the public relations officer of GCOM made a false public statement to say that an injunction was granted. And this was at a time when the chairman and the commission had met and they explained to the PRO that no injunction was granted. And Lowenfield, therefore, is not restrained. The PRO, as a member of the secretariat, which Lowenfield heads, the GCOM secretariat, not the commission. Remember, there is a commission, and the secretariat is simply the clerical unit of the commission to carry out decisions of the commission. But you have this secretariat constantly countermanding positions coming from the commission. Anyhow, so that is where the report was put on pause, or the process at GCOM was put on pause until we got to court, because the chairperson, I suppose, rightly said that though no injunction was granted, as a former judicial officer, out of respect, she should await the hearing and determination of whatever it is that was filed. So we went to court, and what was filed was a completely frivolous and vexatious action. It has no merit, it had no merit, it still has no merit, and it was not the type of action to be filed in that special jurisdiction. Remember, election matters and election laws are a unique set of rules. They are what is in law called sui generis, meaning they are of one of its own kind. And the jurisdiction in the High Court and so on are specifically set aside for that. The jurisdiction that they invoke in the Court of Appeal, to make it simple for your readers, your listeners, is a special jurisdiction only to challenge a president after that president is elected upon the ground that he was not qualified to be president. That he didn't satisfy one of the constitutional requirements. For example, he was not a citizen of Guyana, or he was a convicted felon. Those are disqualifications to the presidency. So what they did was that they dress-made this matter I believe they figured that they don't have a chance in the High Court because the judges in the High Court would have chased them away because the application has no merit. But they felt somehow somebody gave them some assurance, obviously, in my view, and I say this with the greatest of respect, that they should go to the Court of Appeal and they will get through. So they went to the Court of Appeal. They obviously told Lowenfield, hold on, don't present no report, even if you have to lie to say that an injunction was granted. And we are going to get something out of this Court of Appeal that will help you do what we want you to do. Right? And that's the rigging cabal I'm talking about. Because Lowenfield, I'm not mixing words anymore. Lowenfield must have established to the world by now that he's part and parcel of that rigging cabal. So they put Lowenfield on hold and they said, hold on, we will get something from the Court of Appeal that you will use to carry out your agenda and our agenda. So they get the Court of Appeal to interpret the Constitution. They bend and twist the language, and all of that will be just now. We will hear from the CCJ to say that more votes in the Constitution means more valid votes. Now, you and I know that if the Constitution says that the person who is to be the president must come from the list that has received the most votes, it can be invalid votes. Nobody has ever elected an invalid votes. So when the Constitution speaks to votes, obviously it means valid votes. When the Constitution speaks to the citizens of Guyana, it doesn't mean the illegal citizens of Guyana, it means the citizens of Guyana. The Constitution speaks to a Guyanese passport. It doesn't mean an invalid or expired passport. It obviously means a valid passport. So when the law speaks about these things, it's the legal form of it. So votes are always valid unless a court invalidates it. So that is what they said. That's all they said, that more votes in the Constitution mean more valid votes. And that is in terms of determining who is the president. Lowenfield held on to that. The court put its order on hold, on stay, for 3 days. Within 1 day after the court ruling, Lowenfield presented the report. And then two important things I want you to observe. One, when he was not restrained by the court, he said he was restrained. And when he was actually restrained by the court with a stay of execution, he violated it and presented the report, right? So you see the scam that we're dealing with. So Lowenfield now, using that valid vote definition, he went and he locked himself up in a room somewhere and he decided, you know what? The PNC said that 75,000 dead people voted at elections. And also 60,000 migrants. 60,000 people live in Scarborough and New York and so on. All of them voted here, along with 75,000 dead people. And Lowenfield take out 115,000 of PVP votes and throw it one side. I said, I'm not going to count this because this is not valid votes. And I will determine what is valid. I don't have to hear anybody. I don't have to give anybody a hearing. Although the right to vote is a legal right, you can't deprive a person of a right without giving him a hearing. That's natural justice, basic law. And also you have to tell the man the reason why you are denying him his rights. And you must also, the right to be heard includes a right for the man to interrogate the allegation that you're making against him. And for him to lead evidence to rebut that. That's how the law functions in a civilized society. Lowenfield took all these principles and threw them out of the window and determined that he is God, judge, jury, executioner, prosecutor, magistrates, everything. And he determined that I will invalidate 115,000 votes, thereby giving APNU a victory at elections. Of course, that's all that they want, the pack of thieves that they are. So we had to go to the CCJ. We had to go to the CCJ simply because Lowenfield in his letter, the covering letter of his report, said that I am taking guidance from the decision given by the Court of Appeal. So we had to go and set aside that decision and possibly invite the court to consider making other orders. But we don't know how far the court will go, and I don't wish to speculate. But certainly the court ought to consider if it will consider invalidating Lowenfield's report. It's wrong anyhow, because he can't deny people their votes. And certainly he can't act when a court order was stayed. And definitely the Court of Appeal decided basically nothing. So that is what the CCJ will determine. They will say, in my view, I don't want to say what they will say, but
regardless what they say, though, what will happen?
Yes,
something will happen.
that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Regardless of what they say, the fact is that the matter has to go back to GCOM, because only GCOM has the power under the Constitution to declare the results. And the GCOM will have to direct Lowenfield and possibly clear out whatever doubts he has in his mind. Hopefully the CCJ ruling will also provide him with guidance, so he will know exactly what his role is, what his functions are, and what he must tabulate and what he must total. It's not that he doesn't know it. Lowenfield is a bright guy. You saw him. We have social videos on the social media right now where he's explaining what he has to do in relation to the 2015 elections. Now suddenly he suffers from amnesia and he get the whole thing wrong. So it's not that he doesn't know. So when the court case is finished, I hope as shortly as possible thereafter, GCOM will summon a meeting and direct Mr. Lowenfield to go and prepare the results, the report based upon the results. Out of an abundance of caution, hopefully they point out what the numbers are or attach it to the letter, because the results have been totaled already and given to them. So all they have to say is, you are hereby directed to prepare the report under section so-and-so of the law, and attached hereto is a copy of the numbers that you must use, because those are the numbers generated by the recount process. So that, in a nutshell, Narine, is what the CCJ will determine and what will happen after the CCJ makes a determination.
All right, so I do have another question for you along that line, but before I do that, I want to give our guest, Daniel Singh, an opportunity to speak, so that way you can draw your breath a little bit there, because you did a good job to kind of respond to that. Very much appreciated. So you've mentioned something interesting, though, about there's a good possibility, of course, after the ruling, whatever that may be, that GCOM has to do its thing, so to speak. So my question to you, Daniel, and I will get Anil to respond to this too after Daniel respond to this question. My question to you, Daniel, how do you think Clarice Singh handled her role as the GCOM chair?
Well, Narine, that's a good question. But before I even attempt to discuss that issue, I want to refresh, and I believe, if my memory is correct, immediately after the recount, when the commissioners had met, I don't know if you're hearing me clearly.
Yes, I can hear you.
But there was, Claudette Singh wrote to the chief elections officer, directing him to prepare the CEO's report based on the recount results. And if my memory is correct, I know I have that letter somewhere, she also quoted the relevant law that relates to the tabulation that deals with the allocation of seats and all that. Anil, you might be able to correct me, but as far as I know, that letter still stands. That letter has not been responded to. In fact, Keith Lowenfield prepared what Anil explained, and I wouldn't rehash that, but that letter is in writing, it's on record. It is just that Lowenfield has not been doing what he's being instructed by the commission. He has in fact gone on record to say he can act independently, quoting non-existent laws to justify his actions. Yet, as Anil pointed out, on social media, there are videos that have surfaced where he himself has explained his role, that he's subject to the directions of the commission. But I'm not the lawman, so I would let Anil deal with that. But in terms of Claudette, and I have some very strong views, and while not trying to enforce my own values and judgments on what the commission is doing, given that the matter is in court and all that. This history of Claudette goes back to March, immediately after the elections. And I have been personally flabbergasted by her inaction or her silence when the circumstances on the ground demanded it or needed it to bring calm to the elections situation in Guyana. Because we know we have a politically divided country. We know that there are two major parties or groups that are vying for the presidency. And at the end of the day, as far back as I can remember, every elections commission chairman has taken on the mantle of responding to queries from the media, from the general public. They have made press statements. And I find that Claudette Singh has not done that. I can recall Joe Singh, Do Not Sing, Steve Suraj Bali, going at pains to explain things along the way. So what has happened, in my view, is that because the commission is divided along 3 and 3, APNU, AFC, and then PPPC on the other hand, you have had these commissioners, says Gunraj and Vincent Alexander have been the main ones in the forefront, explaining their party's positions. And that is perfectly fine. That is perfectly fine. But Claudette Singh, being a retired judge and all that, she knows the law. She officiated in an elections petition in 1997. So I couldn't understand, and many people couldn't understand, why she was not bringing clarity to all these matters. And we can go back to the counting exercise when the Mingo fiasco surfaced. Staff in GCOM were wanting to rest. Mingo pretended to be sick. There was a court matter when the PPPC team went to the High Court for the fraudulent declaration that he was doing. The law refers to SOPs, and he was not doing that. He was cited for contempt of court all through that period, going down to even when he eventually delivered the final declaration, the so-called final declaration, when he moved the location from the Ashman building and all that. Claudette Singh was silent throughout all this. Now, let's fast track or fast forward and come to the recounting exercise, because that's where we are. That's history now. In the recounting exercise, Lowenfield came with 156 days to do the recount. Now, indeed, I give her credit. She came with a revised recount exercise for 25 days, but all through that exercise, she was just presenting information, sitting down in the background and not taking control. She is the chairman. She presides over anytime the 6 commissioners are there on each side. And as Anil has pointed out many times, and he's gone to great lengths to do this, the secretariat is the clerical administrative side of the commission. GCOM, meaning the 6 commissioners and the chairman, they run the elections process. The secretariat is like the office. The GCOM commissioners, they're like the board of directors, and the chairman sits there and she runs the process. But going back to the recount, look at the speed. Look at when we were talking about the first few days when only 40-something boxes were being handled. Then when it comes back to addressing irregularities, there were so many narratives of the APNU AFC party out there that, in my view, she could have gone and brought clarity to these things. She could explain what an irregular or an invalid vote is. She could explain, for instance, all of these laws about dead and migrated people voting. She could explain that she's a judge. She knows the law, and she officiated, like I said in the previous elections, missing documents. Now, thankfully, in her report and in her affidavit to the Court of Appeal, she explained, and she took the position, rightly so, that GCOM cannot nullify the elections. But I'm going at pains to point out that all through that period, in my view, she could have brought calm to the situation by explaining, as the one so-called and presumably independent person chairing that commission, to explain all these questions that were surfacing, and with the blast that was taking place on social media, and everybody was forming their own opinion, and she didn't bring clarity and calm to all those narratives that were being peddled by the opposition, by the incumbent government, sorry. And she didn't do that. And so I believe in many ways, her inaction contributed to a lot of division and a lot of misunderstanding of the electoral process. And in my view, this election would not have gone this far had she taken action back in the Mingo fiasco and put her foot down. Even the SOPs, GCOM is still to release their SOPs. Why not? And that caused the initial problem, which has now brought us down 4 months down the line, and we still cannot come to a final declaration of the winner of the elections.
Well, thank you, Daniel. Thank you. I have to agree with you there. So, Anil, do you want to comment on that as well, too?
No, I think Daniel has done a good job in explaining the inaction and sloth in action from the perspective from the chairperson. But that's water under the bridge. This is the personality and personage that we have to deal with. So we have to deal with it. I don't know how long more we have to wait, but I believe that we are close to the end of the road.
All right, good. So along that line, though, assuming that the APNU AFC continue their game, continue to find a way to, to run the country illegally, so to speak, what would be the possible sanctions and consequences moving forward?
Well, it's difficult to predict as a lawyer what will happen when the law comes to an end. When the law ends, anarchy begins. When anarchy begins, anything can happen. You can have an uprising, you can have a revolution, you can have a rebellion, you can have an invasion, you can have multiple eventualities can take place. You're just living in a society where there is no rule of law, and anybody can do anything, that they feel is back to the jungle. Laws of the jungle shall prevail. In terms of sanctions, at a personal level, I suppose you will have revocation of visas, freezing of bank assets, bank accounts, freezing of assets generally, prohibition from travel. So that's at a personal level. Then at a national level, you will have embargoes, you will have blacklisting will take place. Countries will not deal with you. Institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, the IDB will not deal with you. Countries will withdraw their diplomatic missions here. We are going to be expelled, possibly, from international organizations of which we are a part. The United Nations, the Commonwealth already expressed a view in that direction. CARICOM, one leader in CARICOM expressed the view that there is such a possibility. So it's very open there in terms of what can happen or what cannot happen when the law ends and democracy comes to a halt. Guyana will be in that special place, especially in uplifted commerce, with countries like North Korea and those countries that are ostracized from the free world. We hope that we don't go into that direction. We hope that the election results will be declared, and the rigging cabal will quit, and they will, ride off into the sunset or wherever they wish to go. But Guyana, the people of Guyana, quite frankly, I don't think will sit idly by and allow 30 or 40 people or persons to hold this country at ransom and to destroy the future of our country and the future of so many 100,000 people. I don't think that will happen. Every day that passes, a different international organization or a different international personality is coming out with condemnatory remarks. Every day that passes, the rigging cabal, the noose around their neck is getting tighter. They are losing support every single day, with every passing day. If you go on the social media now, it's flat compared to where it was a week ago. You understand? It's not that they have not tried to put people on the streets. They have tried. Only last Friday, they were in trucks trying to drum up people out of Sophia and South Georgetown, their base, and they failed abysmally. They had music boxes and trucks and so on, and they failed. They have tried to bring people out when we were recounting the votes at the convention center. They failed. They tried to bring people out in front of GCOM. They failed. So they don't have the public support. And why? People got an opportunity to see them in action. 5 years is not a very long time, but it is it's a relatively good period for a person to pass a judgment on where you stand in a government and what you stand for in a government. They broke all their major platform promises. In fact, they did the opposite of what they promised in many respects. Lower taxation, they brought 200 new taxes. They told us that there were lower electricity costs, etc. They put VAT on electricity when VAT was never on electricity, VAT on water, etc. Then they really neglected the country, including their own supporters. They lived only in Georgetown. They traveled in Georgetown and out of the country. Every single week, a minimum of 3-4 ministers were out of this country. One of those trips, when you check it, cost the taxpayers of this country over 15,000 US minimum. One of those trips.
Wow.
Right? And it's 3-4 ministers per week. 52 weeks per year. And these are people who gifted themselves 100% increase in salaries and pay the public servants 5%. And these are, and they started to seize people land. Discrimination, corruption went overboard, massive corruption, violating all the procurement laws in the country. Nepotism and syndicalism is what rule the day in government. Only their friends, and that is why they can't get public support anymore, because only their friends and families are benefiting. Look, the other day, after they lost an election, they give out a couple 100 acres of prime land at the back of Ogle on the east coast of Demerara. And look at the names. They have not given a single Guyanese a house lot. In fact, they took house lots that the PUP distributed, revoked people transport and things. I had to go to court on so many occasions. But they revoked house lots instead of giving. And they give their friends huge swaths of land along the Demerara River, Berbice River, and in various prime parts of the country. So I say all of that to say to you that people have seen them in action and they don't want them anymore. That's why they lost elections. And you know, a lot of people, and they, you know what, they're using race. They are using race. They tried all sorts of strategy. They remember one time when just after the election, they claimed they won the elections. They even sent a document to the US State Department in which they claimed that they won the elections and that the PVP attempting to rig the election. They claimed that they won until when the recount started. And then you hear that the elections were rigged after they were losing, you know, the box open, with the seven mouth open, story jump out. Well, when box open, their story jump out too. When they start to see the ring, how the balance don't lie, the paper is there.
True,
It's counting right in front of them. And then they start to manufacture these tales and these fables about dead people voting. And the thing is not even intelligent. You know, if you lie, tell a sensible lie. Tell a lie that people believe. And that's what they have people repeating. How many people will embarrass themselves publicly repeating this thing? So when those strategies fail, the only thing they can fall back on is race. So they're around the Caribbean now, publishing on all the radio stations how the PPP is a racist government and a racist party and all sorts of things. Comrade, we won a seat in Letem. We won the Letem seat, the Region 9 seat. Indian people not living in Region 9. We won a seat in Region 1. Indian people not living there. We won a seat in Region 7. We barely lost the Region 8 seat by some 100 and something votes. We have won seats in every region in this country. We got over 50 something percent of the votes. Indian population is just 30 something percent. We have more Afro-Guyanese on our side than they have Indo-Guyanese on their side. We have more Amerindians on our side than they have more Amerindian on their side. We have more Indo-Guyanese on our side than they have more Indo-Guyanese on their side. We have more people with us than them. You understand? So we have to reject this racism that they are preaching and feeding there, and they have some extremists operating out of some basements in Brooklyn, and some radio stations and so on, fanning the flames. They won't come back and live here.
That's correct.
You understand? And they wouldn't go and march in front of the White House and quarrel about the racism taking place in America, but they're fanning the flames of racism here. When anything goes wrong here, we have to face the consequence. I live here. My taxpayer dollars run this country. They don't pay a cent of tax here, but they want to run Guyana from their basements in America and Washington, D.C., and wherever they live. But those things are not going to happen anymore. We have moved, we have matured. Guyana is an educated, Guyanese are an educated people now. We learn, the PPP educated this country, the PPP built back this country. We brought technology to Guyana, we brought modernity to Guyana. You know, is that illiterate people you're dealing with anymore? Every Guyanese adult has a cell phone and is connected to the internet. And that is how we were able to catch them trying to thief the elections, the same cell phone. So the point I want to make is that they have to understand, and I don't know how when they will understand it, but I am hoping that they understand it. They must understand it by now, that dream or that plan that they have can't work. It will not work, not in today's world. The democratic countries around Guyana will not permit a dictatorship to plant itself here. The West will not tolerate it. The Caribbean people have said that they don't want it. So that will not happen here. Yes, go ahead.
No, good point. You bring a good point. I just want to give you the opportunity to breathe a little bit. I don't want to take too much advantage of you there. But you hang in there. We need you here, of course. So Daniel, do you want to add to the conversation as well before I move on to the next question? Because I have a very unique one coming up in a minute here.
Well, yes, because Anil, as usual, is very much on point every time he addresses this. And you have to really destroy your credibility in 5 years to then come back and lose elections that you would have won 5 years ago. And I want to draw a comparison back in 1992 when PPP won after all those years of rigged elections. We're not going to go back down that road for now. But the PPPC came into power with a wave of support, a wave of public support after Chedi would have won in 1992. And PPP, of course, won elections for the next several election cycles. And I got the feeling that in 2015, there was a wave of support on the other side. And people who were originally perhaps sympathetic to the PPPC, perhaps voted for AFC or APNU, and supported that coalition. They went under one umbrella in the 2015 elections. And you sensed it. People were supportive of Granger for the most part. And by comparison as well, PPP conceded. They felt that they had won. They filed an elections petition. Look at what is happening now, right? PPP conceded and they left office gracefully. There was no demonstration. There was nothing comparable, not even remotely comparable to what this government is doing right now. But having said that, you would have had to do a tremendously horrible job for people to outvote you in 5 years. And at the passing of the no confidence motion in December 2018, I believe it was, I felt that had they gone to elections, people would have been more sympathetic to them because of the fact that many would have felt that Charandas betrayed them. I don't know. At the end of the day, it was just 3 years into them accessing power all over again. But with all the resistance to court rulings and defiance of the Constitution, people started getting tired because nobody wants to live in a country where the government is always engaged in court battles. You won't have time to govern. You won't have time to lead the country. You won't have time to fulfill the promises you made to people. And Anil talked about them increasing salaries for ministers, and they were the ones who complained about those things. How can you do the very thing you were complaining about and then go and do it 2 times more than what you were complaining about all the time? And so at the end of the day, APNU should have gone back to the drawing board, having lost the elections, because what they're doing now is destroying any attempt at recovering and rebuilding the party in 5 years' time. Elections will happen in 5 years' time. Parties make mistakes in government. They have to hope to capitalize on that. But what they have done now, they have made even people who were not sympathetic to PPP, who are not PPP voters, perhaps cross the line right now because of the fact that they are simply demonstrating lawlessness. And it's sometimes comical, like Anil says. People are manufacturing stories. You know, Granger, for instance, asked for the recount and then filed a motion to his candidate to stop the recount. He said he was going to accept GCOM's declaration, and then a motion was filed, although it was not a restraining order, a motion was filed to stop that declaration. So you have people speaking from 2 sides, and they're facing, like Anil said, people are videoing them and producing the evidence. Look at Kemraj Ramjatan, admitted to his staff. I personally had that recording. Someone sent it to me.
Yes, yes.
Played it to people who are close to me. And immediately after he admitted to staff, forgetting the interview he did with the Trinidadian journalist, not too long after he admitted that on tape to his staff and gave them a farewell kind of a speech. And I thought he did a nice speech. I honestly thought he did a nice presentation to his staff. It was a good thing to do. He goes and gives Starbuck News an interview saying that APNU can still win the legal battle on some legal technicality. I think the headline was.
The guy's confused. He's confused.
How do you keep your credibility to staff who, assuming you find some way to stay in power? How are you going to talk to those people? Because those are people you have to govern. Those are people you have to lead. So I don't see how APNU AFC can come back. Maybe they will still exist. People will still support them. They are hardline supporters, yes. But I don't see how they will even begin to restore any credibility that they had in 5 years' time. And every single day, as Anil said, you have CARICOM speaking out, the ABC EU countries, you have religious groups, you have scholarly groups, you have individual people making comments who are influential in the region and beyond, and are calling on them to concede, because you can't tell me you've counted 1 elections votes twice and PPPC have come out victorious, and you're questioning and you're still claiming you have won. I don't know how to describe that. My vocabulary is perhaps too limited to describe what I'm seeing before my very eyes, but it's totally unbelievable.
All right. Thank you there for your contribution, Daniel. Very much appreciated. So Anil, next question for you. So we're going to keep it positive now. So I'll put it this way. So because this is what most of the Guyanese people want. So once the PPP take over power, that's what they want. Once they take over power, how is it that the PPP will repair and rebuild all the damages caused by the APNU AFC?
Well, the PPP would be in a very, very difficult position. Firstly, we have our own manifesto that we promised the people of Guyana, and of deliverables that we have to deliver. And we have always been a party that delivers on promises. That was taught to us by Dr. Chetty Jagan, and is very much part of our psyche and psychology and politics. Then we have to assess the damage that these people have done and repair that damage. We don't know what is the extent of the damage done to Guyana's international reputation. Before these elections, Guyana made the front page of the Times magazine, the Newsweek magazine, the Economist magazine, as the next Dubai.
That's right, yeah.
The next largest producer of oil.
The next big thing,
richest, the next richest nation on planet Earth. That's how Guyana was heralded in these international publications. Go and Google Guyana now. Guyana is the place where democracy is being stolen, where a government is refusing to give up power, where dictatorship is creeping in, where authoritarianism is deep-seated. Guyana is a country on the verge of social unrest. That is the headline you're reading. Go and Google, somebody Google rigged elections the other day and Granger photograph came up. If you type in rigged election, Granger photograph come up. Go and check it yourself.
I've seen it actually, it's true.
Good.
So you're not making it up. So it's true.
I know, but when I say these things, because I have a peculiar sense of humor, people think that I'm joking. Now, that is where we are now. And these are intangible things. You know, this is not you can see the dollar devaluing or you can see economic growth declining. You can put those things, you can at least try and you approximate a value. You know, you can attach some kind of value because they're measuring barometers to measure growth rates, interest rates, etc. The type of damage that I'm speaking about is immeasurable. You don't even see it. But an investor somewhere in America or somewhere who's going through countries that he would like to invest in, when he sees Guyana's profile comes up in its current state, he skips immediately. You don't even want to read. Before the elections, that gentleman or that investor would have spent a little more time. Let me send down a team in Guyana and see what's going on there. Who will do that now? You understand what I'm saying to you?
Sure, absolutely.
And you don't, tourist destination, for example. Which tourist would want to come to a country that is on the verge of social disorder, riots, you know, that kind of negative, where the government of the day refusing to come out. You're dealing with the worst kind of country. So that is a damage that we will take, I don't know how many years to repair that stain. Because we had it already and we knew how long it took us to repair it. Now they have plummet us into, I see one of the newspapers say, 2.1 billion US in debt up to 2019. 2.1 billion US. Do you know when we paid off? You know, Burnham tried to build a hydropower plant in the 70s, somewhere in the interior. You know when we paid back for that loan? In 2009. That money was borrowed in 1973 to build the Moka hydro project. 1973 is the year I was born. In 2008, I was in my 30s. Then is when Guyana paid back. My entire life was spent paying back that money that Burnham borrowed. We don't know how many loans like that we are inheriting. We left a most buoyant and vibrant economy. It was compared as one of the best in the region, along with Suriname. We had a healthy foreign reserve. We had a healthy external reserve. We had good balances at the central bank. We had a stable interest rate that was declining. We had a stable dollar. High, but stable,
For sure.
right? It was 200. It is 240 for one. Now it's 200 for one when we left government. We left billions of dollars in the treasury and in extra, what you call extra budgetary funds, like the gold board account, the housing account, the geology and mines account, the GPL account, the lotto funds. Billions of dollars we left. In fact, they used to criticize us that we are hoarding this money and hiding this money when the law says that the money must be kept away from the consolidated fund. The law says that, brother. And we used to be accused of corruption for not putting it in the consolidated fund. If we put it in the consolidated fund, we would be acting contrary to the law. It's the law that creates these agencies. They were created away from the consolidated funds. That's how they got created in the first place. A country, when a country starts, when Guyana started, when we were a socialist state, cooperative socialism, everything was one. It was the consolidated fund. And all the country's money used to go there. Then after how it went on the IMF program, the structural adjustment program, they recommended that certain functions of the state must be divested and put into private, what you call statutory corporations, run by a statute, governed by a board. And they must have their own independence, own personality in law. They must run their affairs. They must be managed by a board of directors. They must maintain their own accounts, attract their own liabilities. And that's how the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission was started. That's how the Guyana Revenue Authority was established. That was how the Guyana Gold Board was established, a separate entity from the government of Guyana. And yet, people, I used to spend days and days trying to explain. And after a time, you give up. Because the Kaijur news every day is a different front page, right? And today, you see, now, when they don't have space in the newspapers now to publish about the real atrocities that are taking place. So then commerce and trade is dead in this country. And then on top of all of that, we are hit with a pandemic, COVID. These people have killed off all the productive sectors. The rice sector is dead or declined significantly. Forestry is not performing. Sugar, obviously, they killed that. The construction industry is dead or declining. The gold and mining industry, you're not hearing anything. Bauxite is barely kept alive. None of the productive sectors are functioning. Go and look at trade. If you talk to any businessman now, they're not importing anymore. They're hoping that the stocks that they have in their store sells out or sell out. They're not buying more. That's how you find it. The only thing that's keeping the US dollar at this level, 240, is because of oil in the international market is low. If that oil price goes up, you will see what will happen in Guyana. That is what is keeping the economy at a level, because our largest our largest import remains oil, right? Mm-hmm. So I say all of that to tell you that Guyana will not be a better roses for the PPP. When we go into government, there is hard work. And work to build back people's trust. Remember the destruction that they have done to interpersonal relations in this country among the major racial groupings is not easy. And every time these people have an election, they do the same thing. Every time we have to go back, they did it in 1992, they did it in 97, they did it in 2001. They get people to go out on the road and they cause racial strife and burning and beating and looting and so on. And the same destruction they're doing now. Every single time they leave government or we come to an election, that is what they do. They can't win anything. They're incompetent, as Daniel said. They're absolutely incompetent. They couldn't even thief the election properly. Even that they couldn't do. They couldn't even rig properly. Imagine they control GCOM. They control the government. You still can't rig the election. You're trying?
Well, on that note too, Narine, if I may,
go ahead. Go ahead.
To make a quick interjection, because Anil would have highlighted the challenges, obviously, that the people will face, assuming they get in office. The problem is, an additional problem will be that the expectations of people, having gone through a rough 5 years, having gone through a torrid last 4 months, people's pockets are getting emptied. Businessmen are suffering. So some of them can't pay staff as they would have, cannot give increases in salaries, and all those things. A core combination of financial implications that affect the daily livelihood of people. Thankfully, Guyana has an abundance of natural resources. So a normal parent and father can plant a garden, he can have some chickens in the backyard, and so people can go fishing. They can survive 4 or 5 days of the week living off the land. But I'm making the point to say that as people suffer, as people's economic empowerment gets destroyed, they're not able to do the things that they want to enjoy. The luxurious element of their life or the fun part of their life goes. And so they become desperate because they have to go into their savings to survive just to make a living. Their expectations will multiply because the entrance of a new government into office is going to give them hope, and naturally so. That's only human. But because they will have that high expectation coming after 5 years of a lack of everything that you could think of, is going to make it difficult. And as Anna pointed out, the divisions that they have created into society, not just race, but economic divisions as well, where one group of people, a select group of people in government, are enjoying the so-called good life. Tell me one person who has enjoyed the good life that they promised back in 2015, and let's talk to that person, and you will see what they will see if they're honest with themselves. So that's the other side of the coin. PPP will have a desperate set of people to govern and to lead, and it will take 5, maybe 10 years to bring the situation to some level of resemblance of a comfortable life, because divisions will have to be reconciled. The people will have to be out there as leaders, talking to people on the ground and encouraging them to work hard. And so it's like going back to 92 again, when you had to reinvent all these things just to bring the country back to some semblance of productivity. And remember, it was, if I, perhaps Anil can correct me if I'm wrong, after PPP won in 92, it took about 10 years, went from 2001 and so on, even though it's difficult when the financial crisis had hit the entire world. During that period of time, Guyana showed economic growth throughout all those years. But it took a while for the government to settle in and to restore confidence in investors, restore confidence in the local business community. And it's a whole combination of things which I wouldn't bother to go into because Anil would have elaborated on them quite convincingly. But that's, as a Guyanese citizen, I'm not living in Guyana right now, but I'm in touch with thousands of people in Guyana who are telling me what they are going through. Nothing is happening. People just don't want to spend. So how is the economy going to be running when people don't have the money to spend, first of all?
But Narine, let me intervene to say we're running out of time.
You go ahead. We'll make the time for you. Don't you worry about it. We're going over time here. You go ahead.
While you asked me to articulate the reality and the challenges, I just realized that I may have painted such a dismal picture that I might depress people. But
let them know there's hope.
let me rush in to say
Sure.
that we have a competent band of people from all the racial groups in our country that will form the next government. And we have a plan, a manifesto, that we didn't sit in a back room and concoct. And it is not a manifesto that was designed to fool people. In other words, it's not something that's painted in glittering gold. It's a realistic plan. And when we compiled that plan, we ensured that we did a cost analysis and also did a revenue projection analysis so that the plan, we can actually finance the plan. There is not a single promise made in that document that we are incapable of financing. In other words, our manifesto is not a compendium of promise or promises of castles in the sky. It's a real blueprint plan for development based upon projected income, and infrastructural development based upon projected grants and loans that we can sustain. So, and within 5 years, and we give ourselves time frames within the program. Within the program itself, they have time frames when we are to deliver. Within the first year, so much 1,000 house lots must be delivered. And then another couple thousand. But while that couple thousand delivering, we also have another plan to put houses on those lands, to make it possible for houses to be put on the land. We may not be building it, but we are to create the jobs, have money flowing in the economy to ensure accessibility to finance. That's a kind of interrelated plan that we have. We have a plan, for example, to restructure our government model. We recognize that a lot of people are uncomfortable with the model of governance that we have. And let me hurriedly say at this point in time that that is not a basis for the behavior of these people, the Reagan cabal. Because their problem is not a model problem. Their problem is that they simply don't want to accept the law. So whatever law you give them, they are going to violate it because they're a pack of lawless people. They just don't want to lose an election. They want to govern. Now, why you want to govern so much? It got to be some sweet, any kind of sweetness or anything that's sweet so much. Something wrong about it. You understand? It's some devil, some kind of satanic thing going on there. Make them want to hold on to it. So, anything that is so good is bad. So the point I'm making though, that we need to consult our people, and the big fancy word now is every Tom, Dick, and Larry wants constitutional reform. But they're not telling you what they want to reform the Constitution to. You want me to sit at a table and share governmental power with who? Joe Harman? The man who would want to backstab me at every moment of the day? What agreement can you have with someone who doesn't obey the law? How are they going to obey the agreement? I will know, knowing of these people's proclivities, knowing of their record and reputation, I am going to enter into an arrangement with them. I am not that stupid. Every day you're dealing with a man and he's trying to pick your pocket, you're going to join a partnership with him? You understand what I'm saying?
Good point, of course. Good point.
So we are going to consult. We're going to put different models of government to the people and see which one they want. We are not going to impose our view on the population. Some people want us to go back to constituency type representation, meaning for as far as the post, as opposed to PR. Some people they feel the president has too much power, and you need a titular president with an executive prime minister. Some people want to go back to that model. So there are different models out there, but it's our duty. We promise that we are going to take these things to the people, and we'll solicit and enlist their views on it, and then come back to the drawing table to come up with a document that we hope capture their aspirations, capture their wishes, and capture their demands. That's all. That's our duty as a government. So I say that to say that we are confident that we have been given a mandate to govern, and we will govern in accordance with that mandate, and that mandate is expressed in our manifesto. Because the people read that and they voted for us on that basis.
I'm so glad that you took the time to put a positive spin on that, because that's what I was hoping for right from the beginning. But I'm glad you were able to get both pieces out. So you kind of captured it really, really well. That's for sure. One thing I should say though, because it just caught my attention, despite the fact that you yourself, are going through lots of different challenges with everything that's going on, you seem to have more hair than both me and Daniel. So that's a good thing there. So there's something you're doing right on your end there. So keep that going. So I just thought I get that out of the way. But
it's one of my better assets.
There you go. There you go. So, I mean, assuming everything goes accordingly and smoothly and how it should be, so to speak, I'm assuming that swearing in the new president shouldn't be that long then, if things go accordingly, for example.
No, the swearing in is a very ceremonial process.
Exactly. Exactly.
One election results are declared. Irfan is already deemed the president under the constitution. We just need to solemnize and formalize the process by the declaration, the formal declaration of the results. Look, this was not a, this election here is the first election, I am sure, or first in the Caribbean, and certainly one of the, definitely a first in Guyana, where the entire election was recounted. You normally have a recount of a particular ballot box or a region or a constituency, not the entire election being recounted. And then it was not recounted in a normal way. This was recounted and observed publicly. This thing was broadcast on the radio. We wanted it to be streamed live on television. They stopped us. We got it at least broadcast on the radio, and the tabulation was done live on television. So nobody can be in doubt or can reasonably be in doubt of what these results are. Every statement of recount mirrored the corresponding statement of poll. What that means, when they count the ballot box used at Aandlall, the ballot box coming from Aandlall Secondary School, and when they, you have a statement of poll for that ballot box, it tells you the results of the ballots in the box. And when you count it back, and we were required to prepare what's called a statement of recount after you recount each box. When you compare the statement of poll and the statement of recount, they are identical. It means that what was counted the night of the election is the same answer they come up with in relation to every single ballot box. So how can anyone be in doubt of what the results are?
No one is in doubt except for the APNUFC, so don't you worry about that.
Well, that brings us back to
problems.
It brings us back to what the question you asked me earlier, hoping that the GCOM chair will act constitutionally, as I believe she has done already when she gave the instructions to Keith Lowenfield, and that even if he disobeys, as he has done already, that she will take decisive action to correct and to remedy whatever report or whatever incorrect report he tries to foster onto the commission for consideration. Because at the end of the day, as Anna pointed out, whatever the ruling is going to come back to GCOM and for them to make that declaration. And in whose hands it is? Claudette Singh, because we can expect the 6 commissioners, the 3 on each side, to vote accordingly with their parties. But at the end of the day, she holds the key. And I believe she has that one final moment to not only save the elections, but to also save or to bring some level of respectability after all this would have happened, because ultimately it reflects on our management or mismanagement, if you want to call it that, because at the end of the day, it comes back to her. She has that one final moment. I dare say as well, the incumbent president, caretaker president, as he's being rightfully referred to as, has one final moment as well as to whether he's going to accept that declaration. I don't have much basis on which to trust him, because he has said he was going to accept the recount. He said he was going to accept any GCOM declaration. The GCOM chairman already technically made a declaration already in terms of when she gave Lowenfield instructions. All the commissioners understood what she said, but Granger is still to accept what he says or what he promised to accept. And so I can expect, I'm not very hopeful at analysts. From where I sit, I have that fear that these people are going to want to hold on to power just for that sake only, even if the Guyanese people suffer. I don't believe the PPP will allow that to happen. I don't believe the region will allow that to happen. I don't believe beyond, the international community beyond will allow that to happen, because of the fact that we're now a global village, and Guyana cannot escape as a country in South America all by itself when the rest of the world knows what the results of the elections are.
For sure, for sure. So what I'll do, I'll give both of you, I'll start off with Anil. Any last thing you want to say that you didn't get a chance to say, Anil? Now is the time to say it, but I want to tell you that you never let me down when I reach out to you. Yeah, and when you say we are going to do it, you make sure we are going to do it. And so I'm forever grateful for your time. I know how busy you are, but I can assure you, our listeners, our viewers, definitely appreciate you clarify some of the pieces. And for that, we are grateful. The Canadian people are grateful. Everybody else who are watching, listening, very much grateful. Daniel, to you, I appreciate you as well, too, kind of thing. I've known Daniel for a long, long time. We'll talk about that another time. But I'm giving you both an opportunity to say any last thing that I probably didn't ask. But I've gotten more than what I bargained for from both of you. It's always a pleasure, obviously, to chit chat with both of you. We have had both of you on the show before, of course. So, Anil, any last thing you want to say to our listeners, viewers here? They really respect the work you're doing. They see what, that's, we see and recognize what you guys are doing, and your team, of course. And you said earlier a very good point that we are kind of right at the last piece now, just hoping to kind of get where we need to be. So take it away. Any last minute thing you want to say?
I want to thank you for affording me the opportunity to speak on your shows. On your show, it's kind of difficult. I do this. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, Trinidad
yeah,
radio,
yes.
then Guyana radio, then Guyana TV,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's exhausting to
Of
say the
course.
same thing over and over again. But I respect the wishes of people wherever they are. They're interested in Guyana politics, in our welfare, and I'm grateful for that. We are grateful for all the interest that have been shown, all the support that have been extended to us and extended to our country. We remain eternally grateful for that, and we hope that it continues because, as everyone on the program have expressed, we are, while I am as optimistic as you can get, and I am a supreme optimist, there is still, one can't say with certainty when this saga or this disaster will end. So we need continuous support from the local observer teams, from the local diplomatic community, from the international community, from the international organizations, sister countries, governments, etc. We continue to look forward for their support because the truth of the matter is, Narayan, that the world is one small global village.
Correct.
Not like long ago where, you you saw things distantly. When you think about Canada, it's a different world altogether. And Canada is just one flight away.
That's right.
It's so close compared to how it used to be. So with this, whatever happens in Guyana will impact the entire CARICOM.
Of course.
And I was fortunate to have attended a meeting with 5 heads of government of the Caribbean and President Granger and Mr. Bharat Jagdeo at the CARICOM Secretariat during the same period, just after Mingo's fraudulent tabulation. And the Caribbean leaders made it very clear to Mr. Granger and to Mr. Jagdeo that CARICOM and the Caribbean people have a horse in this race. Let them for not one moment think that this is a PNC or a APNU and a PPP matter. It's not. And it's not a matter only for Guyana. The Caribbean people and CARICOM as a region will suffer severe detriment if one of its member states becomes a black sheep internationally and sanctions are imposed. These sanctions are interrelated. If the banks pull out of Guyana, it means it affects every bank in the Caribbean. You understand? And that is the kind of, because these are regional, you have regional establishment. So the world, we have Venezuela right behind us. That's the problem. And another thing that we didn't touch on is the impact that this um, travesty, the state that we are in as a nation state, a government that is illegal, that is in transition, and that's refusing to recognize election results, and they don't even have a caretaker status because they were dealt with by a no confidence motion. Complicated. You don't even understand what their legal status is, and you have Venezuela there with a claim at the International Court of Justice. You have a prime minister who is absolutely uneducated about the matters about which he speaks. He speaks about geopolitics, and he speaks about a whole set of things, opening our territorial sovereignty to all kind of claims and attacks. And he is so unintelligent that he doesn't understand. He's like a child with a gun in his hand. And so he makes all these statements around the Caribbean, not appreciating the deep ramifications that can flow from them. Venezuela can invade at any time now, recognizing the way that we are now, a ripped apart country without a strong government. So all these things are reasons why we have to do that which is necessary or which are necessary to bring this situation to a fluid end, so that normalcy can return and we can have, a country, a nation state back along the tracks of the rule of law and constitutionality. Civilization itself is being threatened. Guyana as a civil society is under threat right now, and we need to correct that. And there's no one race that will suffer or one group of people that will suffer when these things go awry and when the disaster hits home. It's every single Guyanese.
Sure.
Every single Guyanese. When we were reduced to the poorest country in this hemisphere, there was no race that was exempted. There was no ethnic group that lived, aloof and above the situation. It's every child from every parent, from every geographic area that faced the same dilemma. So I hope that common sense and good sense will prevail, and that the election results will be accepted, well, declared for us, then accepted, and there is a quick transition of government so we can move on with the developmental agenda of Guyana.
That's what the Guyanese people are waiting and hoping for. It's been extremely too long, so we're hoping it gets there. So we will be watching keenly, of course. So how about you, Daniel? Any last word you'd like to say?
Yes, and a little bit of a personal story, because I have never been a politically public person. I make no excuses about the fact that I'm supportive of the PPP government. Doesn't mean I can't have constructive criticism of the government that I support or of a party that I support. But I have largely been quiet in terms of the political circle. I've known people in government for quite some time, and I've worked in government as well, both in Guyana and elsewhere. But this situation has energized me like I've never been before. I have never been so energized to want to know what is really going on and to perhaps become involved at any level that's possible. I am not the only person telling that story. I speak to a lot of people, and I have a lot of friends, Guyanese included, who have been similarly energized. And when people talk about race, Aandlall and I grew up in the same community. That's probably another discussion. I don't like to touch on race because people misunderstand you so quickly. But I have had the opportunity to be involved and to understand what's really happening at government level sometimes. But at the end of the day, for a government and a party to have succeeded in changing the narrative a year ago or so, when oil was the discussion, from one of the greatest oil finds maybe in the century, to know everything that saturates the media about Guyana is about rigged elections and about an illegitimate government trying to hold on to power. For you to succeed, that's like a 180-degree turnaround. You were going in one direction and you're literally going in the opposite direction now. I don't know how to explain that. But I'm trusting that Guyanese everywhere will want to become part of the solution, regardless of their choice. Everybody has a choice to decide where they want to live. That's your personal choice. But at the end of the day, I'm trusting that Guyanese everywhere will want to play a role in changing Guyana and in ensuring and in having a voice to ensuring that the legitimate will of the people is recognized and that the true winners are declared and form the next government, and thereafter elections in 5 years again. That's my final thought.
All right. So I want to assure both of you again that I very much appreciate your time here. There's no question about that. And Anil, just so you know that we are with you, we are with your team, and we are going to keep an eye on things. So my dear fellow listeners, as we're approaching the end of tonight's program, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for tuning in to Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. Please remember to join us again tomorrow, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. On behalf of myself, my two guests, Daniel Singh and Mohabir Anil Nandlall, we all would like to join together and wish you a great today and even a better tomorrow. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.